matter of the people of the state of California versus Orenthal James Simpson, case number BA096.
And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your
Sweet. We are
country.
up and live, Taylor. Hi, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing very, very well. I had a really relaxing Sunday, sort of did almost practically nothing, which
I
was
love
great,
that.
which I needed.
I love that for a Sunday. That's my
Yeah.
fave.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I did get breakfast tacos. We discovered a place here in Austin. It's called Denudo, and we didn't discover it. It's incredibly popular. The line goes around the block several times, but it's one of those coffee places where they are so proud of their coffee, their
Mm-hmm.
coffee beans, their
Oh
roasting
yeah.
methods. I was telling Rachel, I was like, this feels like the kind of place where they probably name the beans,
Yeah.
the individual beans, and have like
Oh no,
identification
totally.
cards for each one of them.
They know
Um,
where they came from, their
yeah,
passports. Yeah.
which is great. Like they're very proud of it, and as a result, their business is booming. Their coffee is amazing. The next time you're in Austin, we have to do a run to this place. It's a whole
Yeah.
experience. So yeah, it was great. But how's your weekend been? Did you do
Um,
anything fun?
oh my God, I did. Let me introduce the show first though.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
So before we continue our banter, welcome to Doomed to Fail, with a podcast that brings you history's most notorious disasters and epic failures twice a week. I am Taylor, joined by Faris, who had a very relaxing weekend so far. And my voice is a little hoarse from all the screaming that I did last night because I saw Nico's on the Block and Paula Abdul and DJ Jazzy Jeff, and it was amazing.
So much fun.
It was so fun. Like they're having so much fun. Paula Abdul had to stop and like use an oxygen tank, and she was like, "I'm 62. I'm trying my best." And, like then she like kept dancing and singing, and like she
Wow.
seemed delightful. And then the Nuka guys were exactly how they'd always been, and my daughter loved it, which was super fun. I'm so glad she loved it because those things are it's a blast. We had such a
Did
good time.
you go to La Quinta for that?
It's in like Palm Desert, so like it's right there's like a big arena that's new. And um so we already have tickets to see Weezer in November. And then we're considering getting tickets to see in September. It's Chicago and Earth, Wind, and Fire, which I feel like we should go to.
Yeah, seems worth it.
So I gotta check up what's going on at that arena, but it's awesome. So yeah, no, we had absolutely an amazing time. And Duke's on the Block look exactly the same except old, and they're cute, and it's
As
exciting.
that as it happens, my very
Uh-huh.
first concert was Weezer.
Really? That's
Hmm?
awesome.
Yeah, what was yours?
Immature. It's like a old rap group. No one remembers them. But I remember going to that band. This is my first like show.
What was your first like big famous one that you went to?
I think probably Britney Spears.
It's pretty big.
Yeah. I saw
It's
her a
just
couple times.
it's just
Yeah.
different in like the production value. It's like we've
Yeah.
all been to like those lower budget ones that you go to the. I have no idea what Era's tour looks like, but I'm assuming the production value is
Insane.
unbelievable. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, no,
So
I'm sure. It's insane. Um, yeah, but oh my gosh, it was so much fun. So very exciting.
very, very
Good
exciting.
time. Yeah.
Cool. Well, we can go ahead and dive in. And if I recall correctly, I'm going first today.
Yes.
Sweet. I am going to go back kind of to our bread and butter. So I I was researching a lot of like fun scandals and things to get into. I was like, I don't have the energy to let's just go to something that's like super lighthearted, chill. And I started Googling around what the highest body count of a serial killer was.
So chill. So great job.
It's just different because when you look at stuff like this, it's like it can't touch and affect you. But if you like research like corruption or I was researching
Hmm.
price fixing, and I was like, this is depressing. It's like it's all true, it's all real, it's all gonna affect us. Like, let's go to something lighthearted. Anyways, I went into the backstory of two killers who have the highest body count, and we don't actually know what their body counts are. We just have like rough approximations. Do you know either one of these people that I'm gonna reference? I'm sure you do.
Is one of them Lonnie Franklin?
No, Lonnie Franklin doesn't make the cut.
He doesn't?
I think he's a top 10 guy, but I don't think, I mean, well, we're talking in the many multiples of hundreds right now.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Tell me. I don't
Yeah.
want to just guess for 5 hours. Yeah.
Well, we'll just you could also just say I give up. But yes. So I'm gonna cover two of them. They're gonna be kind of short. These all happened in other countries a long time ago, and so there's not like a ton of details about each one of them. So they're gonna be like
Oh,
two little short, clippy versions of this. The first person I'm gonna cover is a guy named Luis Garavito. So Luis also had an incredibly cool nickname, which was called La Bestia, which it sounds like bestie to me, but it's not. It means the beast in Spanish.
nice.
So
Amazing. What country are we in?
we are in Colombia.
Okay.
Yeah. And tragically, for us and the world, Lewis actually just died. He actually just died in October of 2023. Unfortunately. So he was ultimately convicted of 142 murders, but he confessed to 221, and authorities
Whoa.
actually think he killed over 300.
Whoa.
So let's get into the world that actually produces a person like Lewis. He was born in 1957 and he had both parents around. He was the eldest of six children, and his upbringing was, I would describe it as difficult. There was like a lot of physical abuse. There was a lot of like weird sexual stuff. There's a lot of weird sexual, like sex stuff in Colombia. And like when people are, I'm gonna get into it. We need to go into it. So,
Okay.
long story short, it just sounded like when he was very, very young, he immediately fused things like sexuality and violence. And then
Mm-hmm.
in like the non-consensual part of it was like obviously a really big component of this as well. He was
Mm-hmm.
known to do things to his younger siblings and to the neighborhood boys.
Mm.
And his childhood just reads just a ton of this kind of stuff per usual. Basically all kinds of weird sexual stuff that he did to kids and was done to him by adults and just all that whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like his sexual urges became a problem in the house to the point where he was kicked out by his parents. But what I can gather, it wasn't that he was like sexually abusing and insulting and molesting his siblings and other neighborhood children at his house with his parents there. It sounds like the problem was that he was gay. Like that's why they kicked him out of the house.
Right. It wasn't all the other stuff.
No.
Ew.
So that just tells you what kind of people we're dealing with. Like it's just like
Mm-hmm.
so he would grow into doing random jobs. He was usually, none of these guys are skilled people. Like none of them are radiologists or brain doctors, right? So like he would just be like a street vendor, and then he'd go work at a coffee plantation in the field. He did have a very, very, very notable problem with alcohol,
Mm-hmm.
and that seemed to make him a very unreliable employee and friend and partner and everything else. His
Mm-hmm.
early adulthood is punctuated mostly by failing at life. He would date women who would always break up with him due to his drinking and his inability to maintain a job. This seemed mostly to be an exercise to suppress his sexuality or sexual
Mm-hmm.
desires, since it sounded like he would never actually be intimate with these women. It was just like something to do, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
This part, I actually don't. Is that sexuality? Like, if you're a pedophile, that's not sexuality? Is it? Like what is that? That's not a,
No, it's like a disorder. Like it's not like a way
yeah,
to
it's like a
describe
brain
yourself.
defect. Like it's not like, yeah, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so he was never gonna scratch this itch that he had, but
Right.
he did,
Or
but
he
in the
did, but
worst,
then it's like not
right, in the
good.
worst
Yeah. Yeah.
possible way, right.
Yeah. Ugh, yeah.
So he would, again, he seemed to know he was fucked up. So he would attempt suicide many, many times. This one time he attempted suicide, it was during a stage of being just totally adrift, women breaking up with him kind of not having a place to stay, not having a really place to live. He ended up actually checking himself into a psych clinic to seek help. It was in 1980. Okay, I'm gonna pause there real quick. For everything I'm gonna say from here until the end, he was under psych treatment and psych evaluation as everything I'm saying is going on. So
Hmm.
anybody who says talk to some like it's not always gonna help.
Sure. It's not always going to help, but it's certainly not a bad idea.
I mean, we don't know. It could have been worse, right? I mean, he could have killed like 700 children.
No, that's what I mean. I mean, like, so maybe the seeing someone helps.
Yeah, yeah. He only
Yeah.
killed 300. Right, right.
We don't advocate not going to see a psychiatrist.
I
That's what I mean.
I okay, no. See a psychiatrist. I would also when it comes to like therapy though, when somebody tells me that they're gonna go to like marriage therapy, I'm like, don't waste your time.
Well, that's because you had a terrible marriage. I
Whatever.
had a great
Whatever.
time. We had much success with our couples counseling.
You
So
should have.
that's not no, that's not good advice.
Fine. Taylor knows a lot about this part of my life, unfortunately. Um, so okay. So he's in psych treatment, all that stuff. So in 1980, when he would have been around 23 years old, he would start regularly sexually assaulting homeless children in the city of Armenia, which is very interesting. It's actually like a city called Armenia in Colombia. And
Oh,
he
I have so many just the homeless children part in and of itself.
this is going to be a theme that comes up over and over and over again. I don't know what these countries are like where homeless children are like just stray dogs
Oh, it's
everywhere.
terrible.
Everywhere. I read that in India too. I read in India or not read. It was like a Vice docu-series they did on
Hmm.
the homeless children of India where like they would have to do stuff sexually
So
to
sad.
like
Yeah.
get by. It's
Hmm.
and also it's interesting because it seems like people don't actually give a shit about them either. Like police don't give a shit. It's kind of like black prostitutes here in the US,
Hmm.
like they get that sort of treatment essentially.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, it's terrible.
Yeah. So he would relocate to the city called Armenia, where he was undergoing this psych treatment. He would start working at a grocery store and kind of restart his life without anybody knowing him. The consistent theme throughout his adulthood was nobody wanted to be around him because he was aggressively drunk, aggressively annoying, and had no
Hmm.
real redeeming qualities. It also seemed that people were starting to like understand what his sexual proclivities were, and they just
Hmm.
didn't want to be around it. Like no matter what country you're in, there's like an underneath category, and this guy was definitely a part of that.
Yeah.
So, um, he wasn't killing kids at this point yet. He was acting, like I said, aggressively and violently towards them. He was sexually assaulting them. So he would take them aside and do what he was going to do, or they would offer to do stuff because they were poor and needed money.
Hmm.
He'd also take little trophies from kids, which starts to be like where he becomes a little bit of a serial killer, like items of clothing, pictures, details like that.
Hmm.
Um, like I said, he was basically just trying to kind of scratch the itch and realizing like that's what was actually fulfilling him was doing this type of stuff. It was noted that researchers found that cities where Lewis lived during the 1980s had a sharp increase in reports of child sexual crimes.
Oh,
Just kind of followed around wherever he went.
yuck.
He would attempt his first murder in October of 1992 when he tries to lure a boy who was selling cigars and try to take him back to a hotel room. He was caught doing this by police, and in a sign of what law enforcement in Colombia was at the time, they basically beat the shit out of him with their revolvers. They pistol whipped him. They stole $1,000
Hmm.
off him. They stole his watch and his ring, and then they let him go. So
Okay.
3 days later, he would successfully commit his first murder by killing a 13-year-old boy who, weirdly enough, was named Juan Carlos. I like had to
Well,
reread that several times. I was like,
there's a
what
lot
the
of
fuck?
Juan Carlos's. That's not.
Oh, I guess, yeah, good point.
Yeah.
He went up to this kid, offering him work, which convinced him to go with Lewis to a remote area where he was later found having had his genitals removed, shoved into his mouth, and his throat cut.
Oh my God, poor
Yeah.
baby.
A few days later, he would run into a 12-year-old boy named John Canaranda. And it seems like from here on out, the bloodlust kind of just takes over. Again, he was convicted of 142 of these. So I don't think I need to like keep saying what he did to the remaining 140 victims. You
Oh,
get it.
yeah.
Like that was his
Yeah,
MO. That's
yeah.
basically what he did. One detail that would arise in his later murders is that he would decapitate his victims, and there was just so many stab wounds. It reminded me a lot of Andre Chikatilo, where
Hmm.
it was just crazy. Like, from what it was described later on when he confesses, it sounds like he just kind of blacked out. He would black out, wake up, just be covered in blood, and just have destroyed some human
Poor
in front of him.
child.
Yeah.
Ugh. Yeah.
One fun fact was that he also stole their toes. So that was when he started doing his when he started actually doing committing the killings, he would steal their toes. But he was actually pretty clever about this. So he had these toes in a suitcase. He had this black suitcase that he would just leave at certain places. It was at his sister's house for a while. It was a girlfriend's house for a while. He just left this suitcase that had all his trophies in it. And he started getting paranoid, saying, "Look, listen, Lewis, if the police start sniffing around and they find a suitcase full of dead children's toes, they're gonna think it's you." And so, much to his credit, he ended up getting rid of the toes. So
That's just like the least fun fact I've ever heard of my whole entire life. But keep going. Did he have them in like individual baggies, or was it just like
I don't
loose
know.
toes in the
It
suitcase?
was probably loose toes. This guy's not that organized.
Gross. Okay. Ugh, that's horrifying. Poor babies.
So, in November of 1998, a mass grave was discovered by police, which contained the bodies of 36 children.
Oh my God.
They later found two more mass graves, one containing 41 and the other containing 27 children.
Where were they? Like in the woods?
Yeah. Yeah, there'd
Oh
be
my
some
God.
remote spot by ravines. There was one that was discovered under like a bridge, like a ravine situation.
Oh my God.
They all shared similar manners of death, and there was always liquor bottles, cigarette butts left behind. So police determined that this was likely the work of a single person. But then again, wouldn't there always be liquor bottles and cigarette butts left behind? Even if it was like
Yeah, that doesn't
multiple
mean it's one
people?
person.
Yeah.
It just means like, yeah.
I think
I
the
don't get that. That
connection
doesn't make sense.
I think
I
the
mean, if it was
connection
like
was
one cigarette,
well, no, I think the connection no, was no, because it was he didn't kill all these people in one sitting. No, I think the connection was they all had a similar manner of death and the same kind of trauma to their bodies, and that probably is what
hmm
clued them in. So, on February 6th of 1999, Lewis was dating a woman named Graciela Zabalita and had just gone on a killing spree. He had just killed a kid, and he was blind drunk and had passed out on top of his corpse with a lit cigarette in his hand.
Oh my God.
Yeah, he was a mess. That's what's crazy is like, how did nobody catch this guy for so long? He was such an obvious mess. But like I
I mean,
said,
I feel like
it's
he's like, is he not covered in blood?
yeah, he'd be covered in blood.
Was Chikatilo the one who figured out how to like stab someone where the blood would not gush
That
in
was
his
Peter
direction?
Curtin,
Okay.
the vampire of
Vampire
Dusseldorf.
Dusseldorf. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that guy.
Yeah,
He
yeah.
was cool. Not good, but still. So yeah, he falls asleep on this kid's corpse. Falls asleep. He blacks out. Like I said, a lot of these stories are him blacking out and him waking up in this situation. It reminded me a lot of. Do you remember Beer Fest where that one Indian guy he just like
Yeah,
wakes
when
up
Chad
after
Zucker does that. Oh my God, that's so
yeah,
funny. Yes, I think we've talked about that before. He's like, not again.
not again. So he what happened was he ended up lighting the field that he was in on fire, and that's how police were kind of drawn to this location. They found the body. Apparently, the fire like woke him up, and so he kind of scurried away. He left behind his glasses and some clothing. That's one thing you just asked, like, isn't he just covered in blood? I think he took clothing with him because in a lot of these places there was like additional clothing that was found that
hmm
belonged to him, and so he left that stuff behind. He also left a note behind that contained his girlfriend's address on it. So he was really stupid.
That is so stupid.
Police contacted Gracilia, the girlfriend, who let them know that she hadn't actually seen Lewis since December of the previous year, but that he had left behind a black suitcase that she had never opened. So police retrieve the
What?
suitcase, open it, and find Lewis's little trophies, including pictures of his victims, detailed notes about who he killed, when he killed them, how, where, all that stuff.
What? It didn't smell weird?
Well, the toes weren't in there anymore. Remember?
Wait, what did he do with the toes? I don't remember that.
He got rid of them. He just like threw them in the ditch.
Okay, so he had a gross suitcase that used to have toes in it, and
It's a weird saying that.
she didn't look in it. What the hell?
She didn't look at it. I mean, I don't think a lot of these people were asking any questions. Um, so days later, Lewis tries to assault a 12-year-old boy named John Sabagul. He kidnaps John at knife point and he led him to an empty hilltop where kind of like the assault began, as it always did. A 16-year-old homeless child could hear the assault and went up the hill and started yelling at Lewis and throwing stones at him to leave this kid
Good.
John alone. Lewis was distracted enough so that John and the 16-year-old could make an escape together. He gave chase and he was told by yet another homeless child that the two ran into the woods. So at this point, there's a big enough commotion happening where somebody had called the police. Lewis is in the woods with his dagger searching for these kids. They're not there. They're actually hiding in a farmhouse nearby.
Oh my
And
God.
And so police are out waiting outside the woods when Lewis comes out with this dagger. He ends up telling police that he's actually a guy named Liscano, like some local politician like character. And police are like, we're not buying that, and we're just gonna go ahead and arrest you until we figure out who you are and what you're doing here.
Yeah.
So they needed to further verify Lewis's culpability despite having the suitcase at this point, and they had several details about the presumed killer from the items they found at the fire. So they knew the person who owned the glasses had a very specific type of eye condition that only affected one of his eyes. They also had his DNA on the items of clothing that they had retrieved. And so what police planned on doing was while Lewis was at the detention facility, they were going to give eye exams to every inmate there just to see like who if Lewis has a very specific eye condition. In the middle of
Mm-hmm.
all that, they also were collecting samples of his hair from his jail cell to run DNA
Mm-hmm.
analysis on it.
Mm-hmm.
So it came back positive. Obviously, it was like, yep, this
Yeah.
is for sure this guy. His eye situation was very unique in the sense like if you look up videos, there's a video of him being interviewed in 2006. You can't understand any of it. It's all in Spanish. Well, I mean, if you speak Spanish, you can understand, obviously, but
It's impossible to understand unless
it's
you speak
just
Spanish.
how does anybody
Impossible.
do it?
No
Um,
entiendo. Okay, keep going. So
and
funny. Oh
so
my God.
and so you can tell his eyes fucked. So one of his eyes he ended up having removed because he got cancer in the eye. Like, but it was
Mm.
like he had a horrible issue with it. And so that's why it was like a very unique pair of glasses that he had, which is why cops were like, this is
Yeah.
weird. So anyways, he is tried, he is found guilty of 142 out of 172 murders.
Oh my
He
God.
was actually I didn't understand how this works. I did a bit of research on this and I couldn't really get to the bottom of it. So he was actually technically sentenced to 1,853 years in prison, but
Mm-hmm.
apparently the law doesn't allow a sentence like that to exist. So I don't know why the judge gave him this sentence because the maximum penalty at the time was 40 years in prison.
Whoa.
And that was actually reduced in his case on appeal to 22 years in prison for helping
What?
police recover the victims' bodies.
No.
Is that
You were the
crazy?
person who killed them.
There's people who probably did 22 years here for like weed.
You are for real. No, absolutely yes. And okay, keep going.
Uh, like I mentioned this, actually, I did not mention this at the beginning, but again, the tragic part of the story is that he was actually eligible for parole in 2023.
Oh my
And
God.
in a very telling sign, which like speaks volumes to me, he'd already planned out his post-prison life. He was going to run for Congress.
That's hilarious.
Something dead serious. Because he would run for Congress and he also wanted to join the ministry to be a pastor. And he also wanted to start a nonprofit to help homeless children. Like it just sound
Oh
like
yeah, give me a fucking break. An
this
asshole.
could have been a Monty Python sketch.
Yeah.
Like I said, sadly and very unfortunately for the world, we actually lost Lewis in October of last year, the year that he became eligible for parole. He was
Good.
never freed.
Good.
And I looked this up and I probably dug most into this than any other part of the story. How he died. The prison won't say. The prison just says he was dead. They wouldn't give a cause of death or anything. So I'm pretty sure that somebody in there was like, "We're about to release this guy,
Fuck no.
kill
Yeah.
him."
Yeah.
Is what
10
probably
out of 10.
happened.
Yeah.
So our next guy, so that's where Lewis's story kind of ends. The next guy's almost he might be even more interesting. So his name is Pedro Lopez. And he is also from Colombia. He was known as the Monster of the Andes. Pretty cool name.
Ooh.
Yeah. So pretty
That
much
is pretty cool.
everything, pretty much it sounds like a Yeti that was hunting like the alive people in the Andes.
1,000%. No, that's cool.
So pretty much everything I said about Lewis's childhood also applies to Pedro, except for the lack of a father. So his dad actually died before he was even born. His mom had 13 kids. She was a prostitute. She actually kicked Pedro out of the home for molesting the sister, which is probably what Lewis's parents should have done instead of kicking him out for being gay, but still. So he would turn
Yeah.
into a homeless street kid, which, like I said, based on our previous story, just tells you like how things go for these kids. He was I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't even give me any joy. It says he was basically used as a sex doll from when he became homeless to early adulthood. Like
Ugh.
he was
Yeah.
horribly, horribly, horribly abused. Like it was there's details about things that were done to him in prison that we can imagine, and it was
Yeah,
really, really bad.
that's terrible.
So he was released from prison in 1978 and wandered South America, presumably having already started his killing spree. He later on we're gonna find out when he confessed. By this point, while he was wandering around Ecuador, Colombia, Peru, he will have claimed to have already killed hundreds of little girls. Like that was his thing. He was after girls, and
Hmm.
none of this can be verified. But one story that was verified was that he was caught trying to sexually assault a 9-year-old indigenous girl, and the tribe of that girl found this happening and beat the shit out of him and then buried him up to his neck in sand and just left him there. And just in another feather in the hat for missionaries, an American missionary who was trying to convert these indigenous people to Christianity was like, release this guy. Like, don't do your savage indigenous things. You got to release it. It's like, come on.
Oh my gosh. Great. Good
Yeah,
job, Jesus.
way to go. So, in 1980, a flash flood hit Ecuador, which unearthed the remains of 4 missing girls. A few days later, a woman named Carvina Povada was with her 12-year-old daughter at a market when she caught Pedro trying to abduct the little girl. Good Samaritans stepped in and contained Pedro while police could arrive and arrest him. While he was in jail, he refused to talk to the police at all. And so what they ended up doing was they took a police pastor and put him in prisoner's clothes and threw him in the cell with Pedro. And then Pedro would go into detail with this pastor, talk about how he killed 200 girls in Ecuador and Peru and Colombia. He would go into detail on how he would lure his victims and what he would do to them. Uh, it was very, there's parts of this conversation that are quoted, and I didn't write them down because they were really bad.
Yeah.
So, um, police, after hearing this, assumed he was basically a crazy person, but upon an interrogation, he directed them to the gravesite containing 53 children.
Oh
Like
my
they literally
God.
like, this guy's obviously a nutcase. Like this is nonsense. Nobody could have done this. He's like, well, let me show you.
Hmm.
And he showed him 53. Later on, he tacked on another 110. He took him to other grave sites, and it totaled out somewhere around 163 or so bodies. Um, so he ends up going to trial for murder, and he gets a whopping 16 years in prison, which at the time was the statutory maximum in Ecuador. Isn't that
Wild.
incredible?
Yeah.
He was Taylor. This is incredible. He was released in August of 1994.
Oh my God.
He got 2 years off his prison sentence for good behavior. He
Ew.
served 14 years for 163 absolutely verified child murder slash sexual assaults.
Oh my God.
14 years. Is that unbelievable? That's so
That's
wild.
unbelievable.
So well, there's people who like have stolen more than $1,000 worth of like deodorant that have gotten 14 years.
1,000%. The justice is fucked up everywhere.
Yeah.
Makes
Yeah.
no sense. Yeah.
And he so what ended up happening was that he was deported to Colombia, where he was picked up as an illegal immigrant. So he's Colombian. He was deported there. Wait, actually, I don't know why. You know what? Never mind. I know why. So he was deported to Colombia, which is his actual home country. But I guess in Colombia, you have to renew your proof of citizenship, which I'll get into here in a moment because this actually comes up later on. So he was arrested for not having that, and he was presumed to be crazy and sent to a mental institution. He was released from that mental institution 4 years later in 1998. And the last time he
Hmm.
was seen was in 1999 when he went into a government facility to renew his citizenship paperwork. So that's it. That's the last we heard of him. So presumably he's still kicking around somewhere in South America at 75 years old, doing God knows what.
Whoa.
Is that crazy?
Hmm.
Seems like a
I mean,
weird
hopefully,
fluke of justice that this guy's like, I don't know. It's kind of wild.
yeah.
Because here in the
Yeah.
US, like what I've seen from, I mean, what you hear about is like when things like children are involved, like crimes against children or like the elderly or the weak or the infirm or whatever else, usually it seems like the prisoners deal with it. like like it doesn't
Yeah.
matter what the crime is, but it sounds like it's just not like that. Like again, so much of the story that of Pedro's like childhood and life when he became homeless was men just picking him up and doing stuff to him as a
I
kid.
know.
Like it's
Yeah,
just so common. I don't know. I don't know.
it's terrible. I mean, it sounds like it was just like a terrible environment to be in and at all stages,
Yeah.
like for
Yeah.
them and for the kids. And like, you know, with that the abusers often were abused, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah. I mean
and
that was the
that's
situation with him and his sister.
yeah.
He was molesting his sister. But he
Hmm.
like learned that somewhere,
Exactly.
which is horrible. Which is horrible. It's
It's
sad.
horrible.
These two are the top of the ticket as far as most confirmed kills and most assumed kills.
Hmm.
But there are a few others. Yeah, so Luis Garavito gets number one. Pedro gets number two. Okay, so Luis is now up to 193 confirmed kills. Pedro's up to
Wow.
110. Then you have Javad Iqbal, which I think he did an episode on, didn't I? No, it was some Indian guy, or this is Pakistan. He's at 100. You have Mikhail Popkov at 78. You have another Colombian at 72. Where's Lonnie? Okay, the first American on this list is Samuel Little at 60.
Well, maybe that's who I'm thinking of.
And the second American is Gary Ridgway at 49.
Wow. I mean, these stories are just so much more. Like
Yeah,
so
I
many
mean,
more.
it's interesting because you look at like John Wayne Gacy and we're like so aghast. It's like he killed 33. He killed
So many. So
he,
many.
I'm not saying it's not a lot. He killed 160 less children than this guy did.
I know it feels like, gosh, just it's like an overwhelming number. That you're like, I just can't believe that. It's
Yeah.
wild. Yeah.
So, anyways, that's my story. If you're ever in Colombia, and a 75-year-old, you come across a 75-year-old named
Hmm.
Pedro, maybe just go the other way.
Remember when I thought my sister was missing in Colombia and
Yeah.
I called the embassy because we just like weren't sure. And you know,
Was that a situation where you went over the top without any reason to, or was there actual reason to?
well, we just like she was like newly with her boyfriend. We didn't know much about him, and like they went to Colombia, and then like she said she told us where she was going, and then we didn't hear from her for like 3 days. So later she was like, "You guys overreacted," but we were like, "What?" Like they were on an island with no Wi-Fi, but she didn't tell anyone, and she like had been communicating with us. You know,
Yeah, I guess the
it
tell
wasn't
there
like
is anybody who acts out of character. If something happens out of character for someone, then yeah, that's
yeah,
probably worth doing something about.
yeah. So I called the embassy, and then they were like, our next step was to, like put her picture in hospitals and stuff. But we didn't get there because she got off the island. She's but
She would have been so surprised.
yeah. She like gets off the island and I'm like standing there, like trying to find her
I
and
mean, it
like
sounds it
follow
sounds like
her
it was a
steps.
awesome weekend on a island in Colombia with no cell service. That sounds incredible.
Doesn't that sound amazing?
Yeah.
No, I agree. That sounds really nice.
So when I went to Fiji and I was like, the number one benefit of being in Fiji was very little service.
Yeah. Yeah, if you're relaxing in school. Well, thank you. I hadn't heard of those two.
Yeah, they're
And probably because it's just so
horrible,
terrible.
horrible monsters. Yeah,
Yeah.
it reminds me of with last podcast when they talk about like the most vicious and horrible people and how you don't really hear about them because they're just too
Hmm.
over the top. Like I think about like Dean Coral or Charles Ing, and you're like anybody who hears those stories like, wait, why do we talk about Ted Bundy when these two existed? And it's like, well, because they're
Right.
too bad. It's
It's
too
too much.
much. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
Ted Bundy's like, oh, look at that. He's like a cute little heart throb. Like,
Yeah. I mean, well, they don't mention that he went back and had sex with the dead bodies
yeah,
enough.
you gotta
They got to bring that up a little bit more often with Ted. But
the way they frame it is like there's nothing charming about these other guys. Like there's something
yeah,
charming. Like Gacy had a clown costume. He was like a politician. He owned a bunch of KFs. Like there's
right.
something to them. There's an X factor that like these guys just don't have. There's horrible
Yeah.
deviance.
Yeah. Yeah. Yuck.
So, anyways, that's my story, Taylor. Do you have anything for us from an
I do.
audience perspective?
I do. I wanted to bring up the monkey business thing. I said that Morgan was disappointed you didn't mention monkey business, but then you had a rebuttal to that. So maybe tell us what that was again and
Yeah.
what happened.
So what happened is that when people think of what happened to Gary Hart, a lot of times they see the picture. There's a picture of Gary Hart with I already forgot her name, Deborah. Was that her name? Yeah,
Right.
whatever her name was, on his lap on a boat. The boat is called the Monkey Business, and this was, I think, it was in Antigua, and people see that picture and like that's what got him kicked out of the race. That wasn't it. What happened was all the other stuff around asking the media to follow him and then catching this woman in his going into his house but not leaving, so on and so forth. All that is what led to him being dropping from the presidential campaign. The monkey business picture came out after he already dropped out, and so that's why I didn't bring it up. But it is an amazing picture. Like he looks so happy, and it's obviously not his wife. Like he's just like
Yeah.
he is over the moon, thrilled that this beautiful woman is on his lap. I can't imagine. It's gotta be amazing. Like you're running for president, everybody knows you, everybody loves you. You got this beautiful woman that's like on your lap, and there's also rumors that he was paid by Lee or she. Well, she wouldn't have been paid. There's rumors that Lee Atwater had a hand in trying to get her to get on his lap to take this picture so that they could
Hmm.
frame it as Oppo whatever material later on. So
Silly.
yeah, when he was on his deathbed, he confessed to somebody that he had that photo staged for the express purpose of defeating Gary Hart or getting him to drop out. So
But Gary Hart and her were dating. Just
no, they
right?
weren't dating. Yeah,
They weren't?
no,
I
they
don't
say
know.
they weren't. They never ever came back around to saying they did. Um, yeah.
Oh, I thought that they were.
No, he
Okay.
was married this whole time. He was
Well, I
married to
know he
the
was
same
married,
woman.
but I thought that you had said that he was philandering, but he wasn't philandering. He was just being accused of philandering.
Yeah, where there's smoke, there's fire. Like he was a good-looking
Yeah,
guy running for
that's what I
president. I
mean.
mean, yeah. It's like it's like
Right.
it's like when you hear Bill Clinton, when we heard rumors of Bill Clinton forever ago, like yeah, like
It's like when you see one cockroach, you know there's like 100 more in the walls.
yeah, of course. Of course. I don't think there's any human being who has ever reached a level of like success and prominence who has not done something like that. Well, Obama. I think Obama's like actually one of the few normal,
Yeah.
sensible humans, but I think that overall, like you just when you have that much power and wealth, like yeah, you just go nuts.
Yeah. No,
That's
I
why we
agree.
all want power and wealth.
So we can go nuts.
We can
I
go
just want to be
nuts.
left alone. I don't really want to go nuts, but you
Yes. Yes.
know.
Teach their own.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Fars. Um, I also told you earlier that I spent a lot of time updating everything. So everything is on YouTube now. So you can check out our YouTube channel, Doomed to Fail Pod. Same with all the social media at Doomed to Fail Pod. And if you have anything that you want us to talk about or any suggestions, send us an email at doomedtofailpod@gmail.com or just message us on Instagram. We're there all the time.
Please
Thank
and thank you.
you for listening.
Sweet. Bye all.